Hey folks, Brad here again. I did say that I would give you a walk around my car to show you a few more things about what you should watch out for if you're going to buy one of these things. Again though, just the answer is always yes. Go buy one, pound on it, do whatever you want to do with these things because they're awesome. I'm just going to let you know a couple things if you do decide to go do that, which again, please go do so we can talk about it. These are the things you need to look out for. Again, this is my 2002 AP1 Honda S2000. I've had it since 2006. So we're talking 12 years and 125,000 kilometers. In fact, I just rolled 180 just the other day. Drive it in the summer, drive it in the fall, drive it in the spring too. I used to drive it in the winter, but not so much. I may actually look into getting a set of winter tires for it though, because that was a hoot when I would do that. Anyway, you know, the standard things that people always talk about with these things are the timing chain tensioner. So let me make sure I can get a good view of that. Not that you're going to see a ton right now, but it's right down here. Let me just adjust this. You know, don't be shy. Oh, I need to put some light on that. Hang on a second. Okay, that's better. Like I was saying, this is the timing chain tensioner right here. Don't worry about this stuff. It's out of the way. The biggest trick is to get rid of this thing, which is very, very easy. You pop all the clips off, pull the air filter out, and there's a couple of bolts holding it in. One is right here, right there, and then there's one inside, and then a couple things that just undo that screw. Let's see, there's one more around here somewhere, but don't be shy, they're real easy. They come out, then this whole snorkel pulls off, so long as you remove this bolt there, and then unplug the map sensor. And then all this stuff comes off and you have access to the entire front of the car, front of the motor rather. Importantly too, is keep an eye on this. That is your a service port, I guess you want, oh not a service port, not a plug-in, but it's a service plug rather. You undo that, and then when you put your new timing chain tensioner in, you do have to release the spring, which is held in by either a circlip or, well, not a circlip, sorry, a cotter pin or just a pin yourself, and then that's how you reach in. So when you install that thing, make sure the pin's sticking out and away towards the front of the car so you can get your pliers on and yank it out. You'll hear a quick little tap as it the spring pushes it against the tensioner adjuster itself, and then, or the tensioner itself, and then away you go. Anyway, I will. I keep saying I'm going to do it, and I will do it one of these days. Actually, take all this stuff out and then service mine, because if you've seen my other videos, you've heard that I say there's actually no need to buy a new one. You can actually repair the one that you have just by roughing up the worm gear. And it sounds maybe a little scary for those of you who don't do a lot of work, but honestly it's about the simplest thing ever. And again, the only thing you have to do is clean it up when you're done, which is bathe it in some oil, wipe it with a cloth, make sure there are no pieces on it and no dirt or dust, and then when it does come time to put it back together, just coat it with some more oil and put it in. It's pretty easy. So anyway, that's that. Keep that in mind. And then the next thing I'm going to move on to here is the map sensor. In another one of my videos, there was a comment from eFlam, so thanks for that, about any things you should look out for. And I said you sometimes have to look out for the map sensor. If you're idling a lot in traffic, the car can start kicking and bucking, and it's usually this thing here, which is the map sensor. So this one, you can see I've replaced it once. It looks a little newer than the rest of the car. Comes up with 2 screws. It's obviously really easy to replace. You pull it out here, those 2 screws, push on that and pop it out, and away you go. And obviously it's the map flow center, because it's just right south of the throttle valve. So lots of people have had success tapping that with a hammer gently. Obviously you don't want to mark it in any way, but they call it the map whack. You can Google that too. It seems a bit silly, but with these things sometimes that works. And another thing that I've found cures that is either shutting the car off and starting it again, which usually tends to reset some of that stuff, or yanking the negative off the battery, which is always an effective way of resetting things. You don't want to have to reset your radios, you know, your radio stations, but again, in 2018, who the hell listens to the radio anymore? So let me stop there, and then I'll reposition to talk about other parts that I think you folks should pay attention to. Again, nothing earth-shattering, but at least you'll know what you're getting into. Some other things you should pay attention to over the years. I'm actually on my, you'd laugh, but I'm on my second set of carpet mats, because you can see where my heel goes when I'm braking and heel and towing, as I mentioned in my other videos. You know, I'll eventually buy yet another set of mats, but worn right through, frankly worn into the carpet below as well. So if I keep this car for the street, I'll replace them, but if I do end up possibly making it into a more truck focused car, then I'll probably take the carpets out and do a few other things with it instead. But, you know, minor, of course. Even the pedals aren't worn that bad. You can see where I've polished up that aluminum one, as I mentioned in another video. The interior's held up well. It's dusty, forgive me for that. A couple of things here that can tend to rub off, things, high touch areas, but the door handle is fine. You know, even the top sill here, top of the door, the window, whatever the hell you want to call it, is doing pretty well too. The only thing otherwise though is, of course, I've squished the hell out of this bolster, and then this side bolster too has clearly seen better days. But comfort-wise, these seats are still pretty damn solid, and I love them. But again, depending on what I do with this car, I may either replace them with stock seats, maybe get them fixed if you can, or I'm going to think about something else. But the next big thing that even for you Subaru owners, if you happen to be paying attention, please do what I'm about to tell you, which is, he goes back to his prop. Hondas and Subarus come with these damn little fender lip liners, which is this piece under here. Let's see. It's not really that important that you see it, but it's all around here. Obviously you can roll your fenders if you talk about that to give yourself a little bit extra fender width, but it's this little piece here, and it's always covered by these damn rubber things which fit right in there. And every single one that the body shop that I go to has seen that has these start to rust around this little bolt screw. In fact, mine's rusted away, sits right there. If you can see it, it's actually gone. I'll show you on the other side, but they all start to rust there. So otherwise, they're great for keeping that lip clean, which is, you know, the whole point, but they always start rusting and then they'll continue on. So the first thing I would do if I had one of those cars, even if there's no signs of rust, is just take that damn thing off and throw it away. Because not only does that rust around that bolt, but it also tends to collect some moisture and make it worse. So do that, get rid of it. Otherwise, you can see, I mean, this is plastic, so it's fine. You know, the rest of that lip is pretty damn good. It's been gone for a while. It's starting to show up a little on the bottom there, towards the rockers and things like that too. Again, I mentioned I drove this car in the winter for lots of years, so that doesn't surprise me. Yeah, it worries me a little. There's some on the bottom part here too, just some surface. Again, depending on what I do with this car, if I'm going to street it again, well, it's legal now, of course, but if I'm just going to keep it as a street car or focus more on a track car, will depend on what I do there. Because you can get larger front fenders for flare, you know, so you can get wider rims and tires, or I don't think there are many options for the rear other than the overriders that you buy, simply because you have to cut into the fenders to make them go on. There isn't really a replacement here because there's no way to bolt them in. See, these are all seam welded, it looks like, and there's no simple way to remove this panel. So that might be something I have to consider to get rid of that rust. You know, hope to see what options are there. And shockingly, a little spot here that's becoming a bit of a bigger spot. That was a surprise to me, because again, it wasn't hit there. It wasn't even like a stone chip or something like that. It just started rusting around the edge of that. So you know, it's just a little more, slightly more than surface. I'll eventually take care of it too, or I might dive into my guilty pleasure and get a carbon trunk, just because carbon looks awesome. So that's something else to look forward to. And then this side, or sorry, to address rather, and this is the one you can possibly see. Oh no, it's rusted through on there too. It's actually gone. So that's a fender bolt, obviously, that holds the plastic together, so that's fine. But this is where it's gone. So toss those things, man. Anyone who's looking at them, because again, otherwise they're fine here, just a little bit towards the bottom of the rocker right there. So do that. Honestly, that's those are the only spots. You know, it's me. Yeah, there under the battery tray maybe, because that's on lots of cars galvanized as well. That's a notorious spot for where they can rust. But otherwise, fenders are solid. Rockers are mostly solid. Just get rid of those spots that make it that seem to accelerate it, and you'll be fine that way. So more after this. I'm going to fire this thing up and take it for a spin. Thanks for watching. Hi folks. So some thoughts, you know, having owned this thing for the 12 years that I have, that I keep going back to, the 125,000 kilometers. You know, I kind of figure I know the damn car pretty well. It's a privilege, frankly. This thing's pretty damn awesome. Blipped the throttle to go up a gear. That didn't make sense. Is it perfect? Of course it's not. No car is totally perfect. If you want practicality, this isn't the one for you. I filled the spare tire space with a little bit of stereo gear, nothing too much, but you know, I wanted a sub and an amp, kind of very basic, very simple early 2000s kind of stuff, since that's when I bought this car. So I have the singled-in Alpine with the iPod connector. I know how positively antiquated by then. I think, well, I still have my 2 gig iPod Nano in this thing, and none of the buttons work, but it still streams music or plays music to my stereo here, so awesome. It's noisy, of course it is. The pipes I put on it make it even worse, but honestly, compared to some convertibles you could buy, the ones that I've had, you know, it's awesome. It's so much fun. And yeah, like I'm 6'2", eFlam, if you're still watching these, I appreciate the subscription too. I'm tall, most of my height's in my back. I wear between a 33 and a 34 inch inseam on my pants, just so you know that. So I can still easily find a comfortable position. I'm a little, you know, this is kind of hitting me. I have to duck for street lights and traffic lights and all those kinds of things, as you'd expect. But I could, in fact, put the seat back another click. I could I could angle it back another bit. So it's not unworkable. Then, frankly, if you've ever sat on the passenger side of these, there's way more room in the left side, the driver's side, rather than the passenger side. I can't put that seat far enough back to make it comfortable for myself. Otherwise, yeah, it's the pipes on it. Sure, like your girlfriend's not gonna love it unless she likes love cars. You know, it's a little bit. I have my tires pretty aggressively topped up. You know, the tires are good for 52 pounds cold. I put them about 48 because I like to have them wear evenly. Plus, I don't want any slop. This is a sports car, so I've completely pushed it that far. You've heard me talk about the brakes, so I firmed up the brake pedal. The throttle is imminently responsive, so it doesn't suffer fools, and the steering is abrupt as well, which is awesome. But doesn't help you be smooth if you're not so good with it. So if you're in for a hardcore sports car, it's not quite as hardcore as a Lotus Exige or an Elise like that, but it's a pretty aggressive experience. My Miata that I had before this, a Series, well, it was a 1.8, so a 94, just into the Series 2 Miatas with the 1.8. Like I say, that one was a lot harder because I had really aggressive sway bars on it, and to get that thing to be stiff, it beats you up in a straight line pretty good. This thing, for how well it does corner, is actually pretty compliant in a straight line. But again, it's no Lexus, so don't buy one thinking it's going to be that way. So that's a downside. A long way to talk about a downside. You know, it doesn't reward foolishness. Again, you have to be smooth with your inputs, or else it'll jerk and make you look like you're learning to drive. But you know, that said, you know, that's a negative. I'll balance that with a positive. The reliability is the hugest, most enormous, cannot be overstated positive, simply because, I mean, no compromises that way. This thing doesn't cost a lot of money to own. It doesn't cost a lot of money to fix if you have to, and there's not even a lot you have to fix. Parts aren't any more ridiculous than any other Honda, and that means they're probably pretty damn good. Key fobs, those things, I think I have to get another one. I think it's 80 bucks, big deal. But the thing just goes. It takes, you know, you put some synthetic oil in it, make sure you keep that up, but there's no problem there otherwise. So yeah, one downside, although you can hardly call it that, is it's not very practical and it's not super comfortable if you're looking for a Lexus. So as much as that's, you know, a real consideration, I can't really fault the car for that, because if you want a Cadillac, buy a Cadillac. And of course, you've heard that I've gone the ways to make it even more aggressive and more responsive, and and therefore a little more jarring, a little more uncomfortable, but you can't fault it for that. But you know, a real drawback of long-term ownership is I'm a little bit disappointed that the rust has showed up. You know, again, any car that's this old is bound to have some. You know, I guess I'm just not used to dealing with it anymore. Another minor drawback, which has come up with now that the car is getting older, is some of the oil consumption. The AP1 models, you can read all day long about how oil consumption is maybe more than what they've anticipated. I went through periods of more than less, and obviously the more you VTEC this thing, which do it always because it's freaking amazing, but the more you do that, the more you tend to you know, burn up some oil. Although lately, I have to say, this summer especially, I'm not burning as much as I was, and I'm religious about checking my oil and making sure that everything is exactly what it should be. So, a bit of a strange one there. People have had different luck with different brands of oil. Again, keep it synthetic. I run Mobil 1, which is exactly what this thing has had since day one. But that's, we'll go this way. That's just my experience. I'm eventually going to put some catch cans in here because, again, 180,000 kilometers, that's what, 120,000 miles. You're going to get a little bit of blow-by, which is what all that stuff happens, or why that happens. And then I'll just throw I'm also curious to see how much it'll collect with over period, you know, between oil changes and things like that, just to see how much it loses. Because there was a point when I would be really aggressive on this car. I'd have to top it up a little more frequently than I was hoping. But again, the AP1s tend to do that. The AP2s, I've heard, don't use any at all. So that's fantastic. I'm still a fan of my AP1 because I love the more direct steering. It's a quicker steering ratio, like you heard me say. There's no understeer in this thing from the factory, which is very rare. And of course, I love the 9,000 RPM red line, which is just fantastic. So, yeah, again, hardcore car. You want it? That's what you pay for. So yeah, the aggressiveness, the rust is kind of annoying. A bit of oil burning, but nothing too dramatic. Again, it hasn't done it at all, and I've put 5,000 kilometers on it this summer. So I'm due for an oil change, which I'll do, you know, before I put it away, if I don't drive it in the winter. But that's no big deal. Just the wear and tear. In fact, a lot of it's held up really well. The roof has a minor tear in it, which isn't big enough for me to worry about, especially since it's down most of the time. So who cares? And even then, it doesn't even have that many squeaks and rattles. You know, I've never had to, you know, adjust the window in the door frame to make it seal properly. I've never had to worry about the roof squeaking so much that I want to stab myself in the face. It's really just screwed together well. When I drove it in the winter, I did take it in to get an alignment done on it once, and they had a little bit of trouble with one of the adjusters in the bushings because it was pretty seized up. They managed to, you know, heat it up and get that loose so they could do an alignment, but that's something. But I can't fault the car for that. That's simply because I drove it constantly. It is that many years old now, 16 years old, 16 model years, and it's been through minus 40. It's been through salt and snow. Well, not a lot of salt, but snow and gravel and mountains, everything. So can't really fault it for that either. And frankly, if I drop the subframe to do the clutch, I might start investigating all of that in the front too, and put urethane bushings in to replace that. So, you know, that's fine. The people say the diff can be a little weak. I don't do a lot of drop clutch starts, so you know, I'm pretty ginger on my stuff because this car is pretty awesome. I do slam it into gears a couple times in the second, but nothing too hard. So I haven't noticed the weakness in the diff. The carrier bushings that I mentioned, I think I'll ultimately replace them because I feel there's just a little bit of a wiggle in the diff, maybe. No clunking yet, but a little bit of fluid has showed up in the garage underneath them, and of course the diff itself, if it's leaking, then clearly that's the problem, but it doesn't seem to be. So that fluid in the bushings, if they get a hole in it over the years, then they'll drip in that stuff too. But that's about all there. I don't know, honestly, what else? Oops, that was my mistake. Trying to be lazy with the clutch foot. I don't know, even awesome if you're driving in anything cold. There was one other gentleman that did mention that these things are sensitive to tire pressures, and that's true. If there's more than a couple pound, maybe 3 or 4 pound difference between the left and right, especially in the rear, you'll notice it wander. If you're on the throttle, it might want to turn one way, and when you're off the throttle, it'll want to turn the other way. That could be all kinds of things with your loose rear end, but the first thing you do is make sure their tire pressures are balanced, and that took the problem away for me. So solid, right? And I've been underneath this car 1,000 times, so I know that there's nothing, no bushings are loose or control arm mounts and all the rest of that crap. They're all solid. So it's a long-winded way for me to say the downsides are hardly any. This thing has been less costly to own than minivans I've owned, than my practical cars I've owned. One of the positives about this car that I love so much, being a convertible, is some convertibles you sit in, for me it's the new Mustangs and things like that, the header comes right up to your forehead. So in the front seat, you don't even really notice you're in a convertible because you can't see anything else than you normally would if the roof was on. In this car, I get a lot of view above the header rail. So when I'm driving through the mountains, which are nearby where I live, you get a full view above the windscreen, which to me is the whole reason for owning a convertible. I don't want to feel a wind in the back of my balding head. I want to see, it's the beauty of everything you see when you're driving. It's light, it's reliable. In the city, I average about 10 liters per 100 kilometers, and that's driving it aggressive, and that's in the city, stop and go, some freeway driving. But and I'm in the VTEC all the time. I'm not for this video because it's a little too loud, but it even gets good gas mileage, so you don't even have to worry about that. And in typical Honda reliability, there isn't like a down payment of buying the car and then the upkeep, which is your monthly payments. You don't want to touch this thing, you don't have to. Change the oil, of course, that's the simplest thing to do, it's cheap. But do it yourself, honestly. If you don't know how to do that, you should learn. And frankly, if you want me to, I'll make a video on how to do it. It's dead simple. The brakes last a long time. I've got really aggressive brakes on mine, so I've eaten my rotors up pretty good. But that's my own doing. You put the stock stuff on this thing, it'll drive it like it'll be as reliable as your Honda Accord. Well, there you have it again, folks. Another end of a randomized video, or random video with the things that I just come to my mind as I'm driving along. Again, I hope you don't take those drawbacks that I mentioned as really anything serious, because they're not at all. Again, working on this car is pretty straightforward, even for people that don't have a lot of experience wrenching. Unless you take the motor apart, you can't screw up too much. So that's there's a piece of that. Timing chain tensioner. There are enough videos on there. Give it a shot. And if you're still worried, drop me a note. I'll happily put a video up of how to do exactly what I'm talking about. The belts and oil and all that stuff is dead simple, so don't be afraid of that. The brakes are dead simple. There's nothing at all unique about this car that makes it a challenge to work on in any capacity. Hell, I even put a stereo in this thing. That took a little more effort than you might expect, but even then it was very straightforward. Cut your teeth on it. I encourage anyone who doesn't wrench to really give it a shot. It's not hard. Start with the simple things like changing oil, and just understand that, don't start the car until you put more oil back in. After that, the rest of it's pretty straightforward. You can take the water out of a jug and fill up the jug again, then you can change your oil. Dead simple. Do those things. The car is totally rewarding. It runs like a champ all the time. Do the plugs like I mentioned. 100,000 K, like 60,000 miles. That's easy. Just be careful with them. You don't want to strip an aluminum head, but that's pretty straightforward too. Honestly, just get in there. All of this car, there's nothing on this car that is not approachable for the most part. So if you're looking to cut your mechanic teeth on it, you find one that's a little beat up, needs a little bit of work, jump on it, man. You're not going to find anything easier to work on that does this kind of performance, or that has this kind of performance. So don't be afraid of it. Go buy one, change the oil, have a great time. If stuff goes wrong with it, you don't know how to fix it, drop me a note. I'm sure I know how to do it. I actually even have the full technician's manual for this car too. So things like torque settings on your torque wrench, all of those things that you need, it's all right there, all totally simple. accessible. Just don't buy one of these things to take your great grandmother to church in if that's your thing, because unless you used to race cars or run moonshine in the good old days, maybe. This thing's awesome. How do you not have a good time in a car like this on a sunny afternoon? You know, not a lot of traffic, beautiful place. You know, you can't really beat it. I love all those cars with roofs too, like the BRZs and the 911s. And one of my short-term dream cars is a Cayman. The roof doesn't come down. I think that's as much as I love it. Yeah, I'd buy a Boxster, but I still don't think I could bring myself to that, because why would I trade this thing for a Boxster when this thing's already so damn awesome? So anyway, folks, you want to know anything else? As always, my name's Brad. Please drop me a note. I'll answer any questions you have. I'll even do some research for you if there's one I don't know right off the bat. But if you're thinking about buying an S2000, go and do it, and send me a picture. I'd love to know if you did or not. All the best, everybody. Take care.